Hi, everyone, and welcome to Friday Night Live. I am your host, Crystal Fry, and I want to welcome everyone who is coming into the broadcast tonight. Whether you are joining us live on Facebook or over on YouTube, welcome, welcome, welcome as you come in. For those of you who are watching this in the replay, make sure that you use the hashtag replay and let me know where you are watching from. So tonight, I am very excited. Some of you may have seen my personal invitation to you earlier today to come and join me tonight as we are kicking off a 4-part series for Friday Night Live. So the next 4 weeks, including tonight, we're going to be talking about fear. Tonight, we are going to be talking about, oh, hey, my friend Tim, how are you? It's so good to see you. Thank you. Welcome back. Yes, I've been away for a little while, so I'm so excited to see you here tonight. So excited to come back in. And what we are talking about tonight on the show is the anatomy of fear. So we're going to do a 4-part series. So tonight and the next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about fear, different aspects of fear. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the anatomy of fear. So as you guys know, I love to define words. And you may have heard the saying that, love is both a noun and a verb. And I've got something else prepared for that, but not tonight. Well, fear also is a noun and a verb. So from a noun perspective, fear, it's an unpleasant emotion caused by being aware of danger, right? Makes sense. As a verb, it's to be afraid of someone or something, to be expectant or worry about something, to have difficulty. So as we're talking about fear and understanding that, one, fear is actually a necessary and healthy response or emotion in regards to keeping us safe from physical danger, from trauma, right? Makes sense. We are innately ingrained with certain fears, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But even though it's important and it helps us to stay safe, it's not always helpful in other areas of your life. So we're going to talk about the anatomy of fear. We're going to talk about what happens when a threat is detected. And I will give you fair warning right now. We are going to get a little biologically technical tonight, but stay with me. For those of you who know me well, and for those of you who have followed me for a while, you know I really geek out about this stuff. I do research. I really dig into it because, one, I feel like we as human beings are the most fascinating creatures on earth, and I have a deep desire to understand us and why we do what we do. So our fear reaction. And again, I want to invite anyone who is joining us live to tag a friend to share this video out, because I really feel like it's going to be impactful for you. And not only to catch in on this first night of the series, but to join me for the next 3 weeks as well as we round out the 4-part series on fear. So our fear reaction, it actually starts in a region of the brain called the amygdala. Right? I thought about this a little while ago. I was like, I feel like I need like a whiteboard and I need to like write things down and point to them. Maybe that'll be for next week. But for now, just kind of stick with me. So it starts in a region called the amygdala. It's a part of our brain. It's a little part of our brain kind of buried deep down in there. And what happens then is it spreads the response through our body so that we can make the best adjustment to be on defense or to run away. Right? I'm sure that you are all familiar with the fight or flight response. Well, the amygdala is responsible for the fight or flight response, but it also plays a role in our memory storage, which is not something that most people think of when we're talking about the amygdala. They usually just kind of, most of the studies on that part of the brain is done about fear and fear response. So, but with it actually holding some of the memory storage too, when a fear trigger happens, when we are afraid, when we get that, when we see something visually, like someone who's coming at you with a knife, right? That's reason to be fearful, right? A very aggressive dog who is like coming at you and is going to chase you, or a bear, or any other thing like that. When you slam on brakes right before you run into the back of someone, right? All of those things trigger a fear response. What happens is, one, the amygdala is responsible for kicking off the process in our body, and it happens bang in an instant. That is going to prep our body to respond, but it also stores the memory of what triggered the fear response. And that's actually important. And it's going to be important as we continue down this series and get into more detail on it. So there's another little part of the brain, and I promise this will be kind of the last little biological, technical terminology that I use for tonight. But again, I think it's important for us to understand. So another part of the brain, which is called the hippocampus, is closely connected to the amygdala. And what that does, along with the prefrontal cortex, this is why I don't like to talk about all of these biological technical terms, but in conjunction, those two things actually help the brain to perceive the threat and interpret what it is. Is it a real threat, or is it just something that we need to process a little bit further to establish that it's not actually a threat to us? They are involved in that higher level processing, which helps us to know whether or not the threat is real. Unfortunately, the amygdala does not wait for the interpretation most of the time, right? What happens is we are faced with a fearful instance, a situation, and our amygdala immediately goes into this response, right? So some of the things that happen, and you may very well relate to this. If you think about an instance where you've been fearful, your heart rate quickens, right? Your pulse quickens, your heart beats faster. You may feel your hands and other extremities get a little bit cooler, and the middle of your body, your core and your legs get warmer. Why? Because it's pulling blood into the places that it needs to, right? It's putting it into your legs so that your muscles can pump and, run away, right? So you can run faster. You may notice that, well, you may not notice, but what actually happens inside your body, those organs and systems that are not necessary for survival, they actually slow down. So like your digestive system slows down, all of these other things, because your body's primary focus at that particular point in time. And remember, this is not a switch that we turn on. This is not a response that we consciously say, oh my gosh, I'm afraid. I need for my legs to get more blood so that those muscles can work harder and faster. Oh gosh, I need my airways to open up so that I can breathe more, because it's going to, I'm going to need that when I run. I'm going to need my adrenaline to kick up so that I can be very, very hyper alert. We don't consciously do any of that. All of this is done in a split second. All of it is, responsible. The responsible party of that is the amygdala. So as we find ourselves in those places where we are fearful, know that your body's main goal is your survival. It's your survival. And that we see those instances most of the time when we are faced with a physical danger, when our physical safety is in jeopardy, or we perceive it to be in jeopardy. But those things also come into play when we are looking at other things that make us afraid. And we're going to get into that too. So there are three, call them categories of fear: primal fear, rational fear, and irrational fear. Primal fear. This is the fear, this is the innate fear that is programmed into your brain as a lovely result of human evolution. This is things like fear of snakes, fear of spiders, even sometimes a fear of heights, depending on what you're doing. So why do we have these? Well, again, as part of evolution, humans who back in the day, way back in the day, who didn't have a fear of snakes would get bitten and they would die. So our brains as humans have evolved over time to have kind of like a preset programming of some of these fears to say, I should be afraid of that because that is a danger to my life. Pretty awesome. So that's primal fear. Now, rational fear. Rational fear is when there is a real and imminent threat to your safety or your life. Again, like I mentioned earlier, someone is coming at you with a knife. That is a real, very real danger to your life, a very real threat to your life, to your safety. A bear chasing you, also a very real threat to your safety. So those are rational fears, right? We totally can completely understand why our bodies would have that fear trigger response. Now, the third one, the irrational fear. This category is reserved for fears that don't actually make logical sense. They vary widely from person to person. One half of your brain is afraid and the other half can't understand why. So these are things like, forgive me if you fall into this category, a fear of clowns, right? I get it. And listen, you guys, my husband has this fear, so it's okay. But fear of clowns, right? Logically, we know that a clown is just a person with stage makeup on and a funny costume. We know that logically. The rational side of our brain knows that. But for whatever reason, it could be childhood trauma, it could be any number of things. We had some occurrence in our past that created a fear response attached to a clown. And so the rational side of our brain is going, it's a person, it's just a clown, so what? While the irrational side of our brain, well, it's not really irrational side, but where the irrational fear comes from, it is scared to death. And the other side is looking at it going, what is wrong with you, right? Let me know if that resonates with you. I can think of a lot of examples, but let me know if that resonates with you. The difference between primal fear, rational fear, irrational fear. So primal fear and rational fear are actually necessary for your safety, right? Call them a biological warning system. All right, that's what your rational fear and your primal fear are. They're your biological warning system. So the irrational fear, though, those are the things that actually keep us from doing what we want to do. What we want to do. So, and that's actually what we're going to focus the rest of this series on, is unpacking those irrational fears. Why do we have them? Where do they come from? What can we do about them? Because they do impact our lives, and they impact our lives in a lot of different ways, some of which, you may not actually realize. And they are preventing us from doing the things that we want to do. For instance, like asking someone out on a date because you're afraid that they're going to say no. That would fall into the irrational fear category. Because what's the worst that could happen? They could say no, right? That's actually not the end of the world. Asking for a raise, starting a new hobby, starting a new business, getting a degree, removing yourself from a toxic relationship. While that could be borderline, depending on what the relationship actually is, most of these are irrational fears that we all have. Listen, we all have them. No one is exempt from these irrational fears. But most of us don't realize the impact that they have on us. We don't realize the cost that comes along with maintaining the irrational fears that we have. So those are some of the things that we are going to focus on as we continue further in this series. And again, this is a 4-part series on fear. Tonight is part 1, the anatomy of fear, where we're breaking down, especially from a biological standpoint, because for me, it's important to unpack things and know what they are and understand them before you know what to do about them. At least that's how my brain works. That's how I have to unpack things before I know what to do next. I need to understand it so that I can know what to do about it. So at any rate, so we're going to focus on the irrational fears, because again, the primal fear and the rational fears, those are important for us from just a human safety standpoint, right? That's the stuff that tells us that we're in danger. That's that stuff that, really, really, we need that as protection for us. Oh, yeah, Tim. So actually, yes, absolutely. Irrational fear, asking a woman out on a date, because what could go wrong, right? She could say no. The worst thing that could happen is she could say no. And what happens for that? See, it's not the physical harm that would happen, because it's highly unlikely, I hope anyway, it's highly unlikely that if you ask a woman out on a date, she says no, that is going to cause you physical harm. I hope not. I hope she's not swinging a baseball bat when she says no. But what that does, and that's a great example that will tie into the rest of the series, what that does is if she does say no, we anticipate the bad feelings that are going to come with that rejection. And because we don't want to feel bad, we protect ourselves from that bad feeling by not doing the thing that we actually want to do. I know. Listen, the next 3 weeks of this series are going to be very interesting from the standpoint of understanding why we don't do things out of fear, why fear prevents us from doing things, even when they're good for us, even when they are beneficial, even when they have the potential to change our lives for the better. We don't do them because we're afraid. So we're going to talk about, next week, we are going to talk about recognizing the fear in your life, how to recognize it. And believe me, it's not always what you think. All those biological things that we were talking about earlier, like with your heart rate and the blood flow into the legs and your muscles and all of that stuff, when you have a physical threat, when that kicks in. Because if you think about a time when you've been afraid, you can recall how the sensations in your body and how it felt. And sometimes that does happen when you're dealing with an irrational fear, like asking for a raise. Maybe your palms get sweaty. Maybe your breath quickens a little bit. Maybe your heart races a little bit when you're wanting to approach your boss about asking for a raise. Those are all, kind of telltale signs that there's fear involved. But there are other much more silent, it's not really the word that I want to use there. There are much more covert ways that fear impacts us and our decisions that we don't really realize that it's fear that's in the way. So I will leave you with that and invite you to join me again next Friday night for part 2 in our series on fear. We will be right back here at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Friday. Again, thank you all for joining me live. Those of you who are watching in the replay, thank you for spending your time with me. As always, it is my pleasure to be here with you. Don't forget to tag a friend and share this video out if you have found it helpful. And I will see you all again next week. So have a wonderful weekend. Take care, be safe, and I will see you all again real soon. Take care.